The rain was coming down hard enough that the sound of it on the corrugated roof over the bus shelter had flattened into a single continuous note, and she was standing under it in a coat that had stopped being waterproof at some point in the last hour. I saw her before she saw me. She was holding a small canvas bag against her chest with both arms, the way a person holds something when they have run out of other places to put it. She was shaking, not from the cold, or not only from the cold. I had come out for milk. I stopped 10 feet from her because I had understood, without deciding to understand it, that the next thing I did was going to matter. I asked her one question. She answered it. And then she started crying in the specific way people cry when someone is finally asked the correct thing, and my Tuesday evening became a different life. My name is Daniel Voss. I am 36. I do archival restoration for a small regional museum, mostly paper conservation, occasionally textile. The sort of work that requires good light and the willingness to spend 6 hours removing one piece of tape from one document. I live in a converted mill flat at the edge of a market town in the west of England, and I have lived alone in it for 4 years, in the way that some people live alone by choice and some by momentum. I have been told, a person who notices things. I have not always been sure this is a compliment. Her name was Cora Elwyn. She had moved into the flat 2 floors below mine 7 months earlier, in a rushed weekend, with a hired van and no visible help. And she had introduced herself in the shared entrance the following Monday with a handshake and a specific, careful smile that I later came to recognize as the smile she used when she was managing something. She was small and quick-moving, with light brown hair she cut herself, and never quite evenly, and a habit of carrying a battered green enamel travel mug everywhere she went, even into meetings, even into the corner shop, even, on one memorable Sunday, into the laundrette. She worked from home, doing something with legal translation that she described so briefly and so consistently that I understood, after the third mention, that she did not want to be asked more about it. She was punctual with the rent, invisible with her music, and unfailingly polite in the hallway. She was also, I had noticed within a month, watching the front door more carefully than a person watches the front door, for no reason. We had drifted into the shape of neighbors who like each other and are careful about it. She had knocked on my door twice, once for a corkscrew, once because a package of mine had been left outside her flat by mistake. I had knocked on hers 3 times, once about a shared radiator issue, once with a spare set of fuses when the whole building lost power, once because I had made too much soup and had reached, on a cold Sunday, the age where offering soup to a neighbor felt more natural than throwing it away. She had accepted the soup with a small, surprised laugh and returned the container 2 days later, washed, with a folded note inside that said thank you. The pepper was the correct amount, and nothing else. I had kept the note. I had not admitted, even to myself, why I had kept the note. There was, in other words, a version of us that could have happened at any point in those 7 months, and had not, because I had understood, without being told, and without asking, that she was a person who was in the middle of something, and that whatever it was, it required her to have a great deal of control over who came close to her, and when. I am, professionally and personally, a person who respects perimeters. I had respected hers. The Tuesday it rained, I had run out of milk at 9:30 at night, which was late enough that the corner shop was the only option, and stubborn enough of a preference that I had put my coat on and gone. The rain had started properly about halfway there. On the way back, carrying a 2-pint bottle in one hand and my keys in the other, I had taken the shortcut past the small bus shelter at the end of our road, which was the point at which I had seen her. She was not waiting for a bus. There had not been a bus down that road since the 7:15. She was standing inside the shelter with her canvas bag pressed against her chest and her green enamel mug on the small metal bench beside her, and she was shaking hard enough that I could see it from 10 feet away in bad light. I had known immediately that she had seen me too, because her whole body had done the small tightening that a person's body does when they have been discovered somewhere they did not want to be discovered. I stopped. I did not walk closer. I stood where I was, at a distance she could measure, and I put the bottle of milk down on the low wall next to me so that I was holding nothing that could be mistaken for an approach. "Cora," I said, at the ordinary volume of a person greeting a neighbor on an ordinary evening, "do you want me to keep walking?" That was the question. That was the entire question. I want to be clear about what it was and what it was not. It was not, "Are you all right?" Because a person shaking in a bus shelter at 10 at night is manifestly not all right, and being asked whether they are is an insult delivered in the register of politeness. It was not, "Do you need help?" Because help is a word that requires the receiver to admit a great deal about their situation before they have decided whether they trust the offerer. It was the smallest question I could think of that gave her the whole decision. If she said yes, I would walk on. I would go home. I would not knock on her door in the morning to check. I would let her keep whatever she was keeping. If she said no, we would have a different conversation. She looked at me for what I later worked out was about 4 seconds, and which felt, in the moment, considerably longer. Then her face did the thing faces do when a person has been holding something up for a long time and has just been offered, unexpectedly, a place to set it down. She did not speak. She shook her head. Then she started crying, not loudly, not visibly, just the specific silent crying of a person who had been crying already for some time and had briefly stopped and was now, at the presence of an unexpected witness, starting again. I did not move. I said, "All right, I'm going to stay where I am. Take your time." She took her time. I stood on the pavement in the rain. I want to be accurate. I got extremely wet. And I did not walk closer to her, and I did not talk, because I had understood by then that the space between us was, at that moment, the only thing in her life that she was in charge of. After about 2 minutes, she wiped her face with the heel of her hand, and she picked up the green mug from the bench. And she said, at a volume I had to lean slightly forward to catch, "I don't have my keys. To the building? To anything." She said this without looking at me. "I have my bag. I have my mug. I do not have my keys, my phone, my wallet, my coat that works, or a plan. I have been standing here for an hour and a half deciding what to do about that." I said, "Have you eaten?" She looked up at me then. I think this was the sentence that surprised her most, and I want to record that I did not choose it strategically. I had asked it because it was 10 o'clock at night, and she had been standing in the rain for 90 minutes, and I did not, in that moment, have a better first question. She looked at me the way a person looks at a lamp that has just spoken, and then she laughed. One short, involuntary, wet laugh, and she said, "No, I have not eaten." "Thank you for asking," which is the strangest thing anyone has said to me today. "I have soup," I said. "I always have soup. It is a problem I have. If you would like to come upstairs and eat some of it and stand in front of a radiator, you can do that, and you do not have to explain anything, and you can leave whenever you want. If you would rather I called someone for you and stood over here while you talked to them, I can do that instead. And if you would like me to keep walking, I will keep walking, and I will not mention this to you tomorrow." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in the careful voice of a person doing arithmetic she had not expected to have to do that evening, "The soup. The soup. You are aware. she said, that I have known you for 7 months, and that I could not tell a stranger, with confidence, your surname. Voss, Voss, she nodded, slowly, as though filing this. All right, the soup. Thank you. On the condition that I sit near the door. On the condition that you sit anywhere you like. I did not have soup. I had lied about the soup. I had a great many tins of things and half a loaf of bread and some eggs. And I had, on the walk back up the hill in the rain, with a woman 2 steps behind me, carrying a canvas bag and a green enamel mug. The specific realization that I was going to have to invent soup within the next 15 minutes, or I was going to have to admit, very early in what was clearly a fragile situation, that I had told a small, unnecessary lie in order to lower the cost of the offer. My capacity for tactical dishonesty in service of not embarrassing other people was, I noted, proving to be professionally grade. I made soup. I made it out of a tin of chopped tomatoes and half an onion and a stock cube and a great deal of pepper. And I stirred it with the specific concentration of a man who was trying not to look at the woman sitting in his kitchen at his small table by the door with his spare hoodie around her shoulders and her green mug in front of her full of tea she had accepted, without commenting on the tea. She was watching the rain on the window. She was not shaking any more. Not visibly. She had not offered a story. I had not asked for one. I left, she said eventually, into the tomato-scented quiet, about 3 months later than I should have. I stirred the soup. I said, all right. I did not bring the keys because I did not want to be talked out of it at the door. I did not bring the phone because it is on the family plan. I did not bring the wallet because he pays attention to the wallet. I brought the mug because it was my grandmother's, and I was not prepared to have this conversation about the mug at any point in the future. That is a good reason to bring a mug. I am aware. She took a sip of the tea. I had somewhere to go. My sister, 2 hours away. I had the coach ticket in my head and the coach money in my sock. I got to the shelter and I realized the last coach was at 8. She paused. She looked at the mug. I sat down to think. I have been sitting down to think for 90 minutes. I put the soup in front of her. I sat down across the table from her. At the distance the table was, which was not close. I did not say anything for a while, because I had learned, doing what I do for a living, that when someone has begun to tell you something delicate, the correct response is very often to keep working quietly next to them and let them decide the pace. She ate the soup. She ate it slowly at first and then very quickly, in the way of a person who had not realized until she started how hungry she was. I am not going back, she said, halfway through the bowl. She said it to the bowl, not to me. I want to be clear about that. I am telling you because I need to say it out loud to a witness, and you happen to be the witness. I am not going back. All right, I said. You keep saying all right. It is the word I have. She looked up at me then, and I saw her face properly for the first time that evening in decent light. She looked tired in the particular way of a person who had been tired for a long time and had been managing the tiredness as a full-time occupation. She also, I noticed with a specific and inconvenient clarity, had a small scar at the corner of her mouth that I had never been close enough to notice in 7 months of hallway greetings. Daniel, she said, and it was the first time she had used my first name in 7 months. Why did you ask me if you should keep walking? Because I did not want to make you have to send me away. She was very still. I watched her file this too. You could have asked me if I was all right, she said. You were not all right. It would have been a stupid question. You could have asked me if I needed help. You would have had to explain what you needed help with before you had decided whether you trusted me to help. That would have been an unfair question. You could have, she said, and her voice had gone very quiet, just kept walking. Most people would have. I am aware. Why didn't you? I sat with that for a moment, because I owed her the accurate answer, and not the flattering one. Because, I said, I have watched you check the front door of our building for 7 months, and I do not think a person checks a front door like that for no reason, and I told myself for 7 months that it was not my business. And this evening it turned out, in the specific circumstance of you standing in a bus shelter in the rain, to be my business after all. I would like to be honest with you about the 7 months. I did not do nothing because I did not notice. I did nothing because I noticed and could not think of a way to ask that would not cost you something. Tonight there was a way to ask that did not cost you anything. So I asked. She put down the spoon. She looked at me for a long moment across the table, and I could see her deciding something, and I could see, with the same clarity, that whatever she was deciding was not about me. It was about her. I was, in that moment, a piece of information she had not previously had. And she was working out what to do with the information. You, she said, eventually are a strange man, Daniel Voss. I am aware. You made me soup out of a tin and lied about having soup. Also aware. I am sorry about the soup. Do not apologize about the soup. She picked the spoon back up. The soup was the correct move. The soup made this a small thing instead of a large thing. I am telling you, as a person who has spent a considerable amount of time recently being managed by other people, that the soup was the correct move. I did not know what to do with that, so I did not do anything with it. I sat with her while she finished the soup. I did not ask her any more questions about the situation. When she was done, she washed the bowl in my sink without being asked, in the specific way of a person restoring, through a small act of ordinary competence, some amount of the agency the evening had taken from her. Then she stood in my kitchen in my hoodie, holding the green enamel mug, and she said, I would like to sleep on your sofa, if that is on offer. And I would like to call my sister from your phone in the morning, and I would like to not have a conversation, tonight, about what any of this is. That is all on offer, I said. The sofa is uncomfortable. I will warn you now. I have slept on worse. That is not a comforting sentence. It was not intended to be. She almost smiled. It was the first almost smile of the evening. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Cora. 6 weeks later, she was still on the sofa some nights and in her sister's spare room other nights, and once, in a bed and breakfast in the town where the solicitor was. And she was slowly and methodically, in her particular careful way, unwinding a life. I did not ask her about it. She told me what she wanted to tell me when she wanted to tell me. She kept the green mug on my kitchen windowsill, which I understood, without needing to have it explained, to be a form of shorthand between us that neither of us had agreed to out loud. When she was in the flat, the mug was on the sill. When she was not, she took it. It was, I came to understand, how she was telling me where she was without having to be asked. The first time she stayed a whole week, I came home on the Thursday to find that she had, without mentioning it, put a small houseplant on my kitchen windowsill, next to the mug. I stood in the kitchen looking at it for longer than I want to admit. I did not mention the plant. She noticed that I had noticed. She did not mention it either. We were, I understood, going to conduct most of the important business of whatever this was becoming, by both noticing and both choosing, for the moment, not to say. By the time spring arrived, she had her own set of keys to my flat, and I had a small dish by the door where she left her keys when she came in, and she had started. Some evenings, to correct the way I made tea, which was apparently wrong, it was not that anything had been declared. It was that a great many small, ordinary things had been quietly agreed to. I was 36 by then, receiving daily instruction on how to make tea from a woman who had walked into my kitchen in a wet coat one Tuesday in October, and had, in her careful and undeclared way, decided to stay. Years later, when people ask how it started, she tells it one way, and I tell it another. She says that a neighbor she barely knew asked her, in the rain, whether he should keep walking, and that she has thought about that question every day since. Because it was the first question anyone had asked her in 3 years that had assumed she was allowed to answer it. I say that I went out for milk on a Tuesday and came back with a woman who had run out of places to put a green enamel mug, and that I did not fall in love with Cora Elwyn on the night she cried in my kitchen. I fell in love, slowly over the following months, as I watched her rebuild an entire life by hand. One small, ordinary decision at a time, in my hallway and my kitchen and eventually my bedroom, with the same patient competence I had first noticed her using on a soup bowl at 10 o'clock at night. She leaves out that she was shaking. I leave out that I had been waiting, without knowing I was waiting, for someone to ask me for something small enough that I could actually give it. What would you have done if you had walked past a bus shelter in the rain and seen your neighbors shaking inside it with nowhere to go? And have you ever been asked exactly the right question at exactly the right moment, the question small enough to answer, when every other question would have been too large? Leave your answer in the comments. If this one stayed with you, a like and a subscribe means I'll keep making them. And I'll see you in the next one.